The sun had barely risen when Serena's name was torn from her lips, like venom cast into the wind of betrayal that had conquered her once proud homeland. The square was packed, an ocean of cold faces turned to her as though she were already dead, a pariah stripped bare by the weight of accusation. She stood silent, shoulders squared, despite the electric sting behind her emerald eyes, the faint scar crossing her left eyebrow, twitching with the sudden weight of crushed dignity. Her chestnut hair, threaded with silver strands that shimmered faintly, even in the dull morning light, clung damply to her neck. The very earth beneath her seemed to recoil as whispers spread treason, conspiracy, and the fall of her family, all blamed on her name. Her voice, when it came, was calm, a brittle, measured confession of innocence, a ghost of defiance. "I am no traitor," she said quietly, that the crowd's roar swallowed her words, their accusations like stones striking unyielding armor. Her heart knotted painfully, but she held herself straight. The ruler's herald stepped forward, voice booming, unforgiving, "By the will of the council and the pain of our sacred laws, Serena of the Crescent clan is hereby exiled, banished beyond the borders. Let none shelter her. Let none speak her name, save in scorn and warning." Chains clinked as they were fastened on her wrists, not with cruelty, but with the coldness of finality. No more pleas would pierce this relentless silence. Serena's gaze flickered once to the dust, where her family's crest once lay proud, now broken and trampled beneath the jeering feet of a crowd that no longer recognized her. Doe, alone, stripped of everything, but the faint familiar strength that simmered beneath her frail appearance, she walked away, each step heavier, drenched in the sorrow of betrayal that would not wash away. The road ahead was long, lined with thorn and shadow, leading her inevitably to the borders, a neutral territory far from home, ruled by the dreaded Alpha King Kalen, a man whose very name sent shivers through the spines of the bravest soldiers. Her heart hammered, not with hope, but with the cold bite of fear, as she crossed over into that foreign land. The air here was different, heavy with ancient power, and wild, untamed scents that prickled her nerves. Trees towered like silent sentinels, their leaves murmuring secrets the wind could not quite reveal. She moved cautiously, limbs weary, senses alert to every crack of twig and whisper of movement. She should have been grateful for her anonymity, but the dense forest gave her no sanctuary. Then he came, Kalen. He stepped from the shadows without a sound, the very ground seeming to bow beneath the weight of his presence. Tall and towering, his muscular frame loomed like a dark god among mortals. His storm-grey eyes cut through the dim light with a ferocity that threatened to consume. The crescent tattoo, etched along his right jawline, gleamed faintly, a mark of dominion that spoke of blood and power, of courts walled by fang and fire. His raven-black hair was cropped short, but even that paled beneath the fierce aura radiating from him. His beast, a primal force buried deep within his soul, snarled low and dangerous. The air rippled with tension as that savage growl slid through the silence like a blade. Serena's heart seized in terror, not just of the man who sought her so deliberately, but of the terrible, relentless beast watching her every breath. "Who are you? Why have you crossed into my realm?" Kalen's voice was low, rough with authority, every word a challenge. She met his glare with the brittle armor of a broken woman who had nothing left to lose. "I am Serena, exiled, cast from lands I loved, for a crime I did not commit." His eyes narrowed, darkening with ancient suspicion and something else, curiosity perhaps, or an unexpected flicker of recognition. The beast growled again, sharper this time, a warning he barely stifled. Many would have turned away, or worse, fed Serena to their wolves without hesitation. Yet Kalen did neither. "You are a stranger to me," he said. "Beneath my roof, you will answer for your presence. You will not wander free." Serena's breath hitched. She wanted to argue, to beg for mercy, Yet the magnetic, dangerous power in his voice forced a reluctant submission. She nodded once, sharply, withdrawing her pride but not her truth. Though the beast on Kaelin's soul snarled for blood, the man himself, ruler, king, hunter, was more calculating. Under watch, he finished. You will be contained, but you will stay. And so began her captivity in the shadow of the Alpha King. Days slipped by with agonizing slowness within the cold stone walls of Kaelin's stronghold. Serena moved silently through the giant fortress, a ghost among warriors and courtiers, burdened by chains invisible but no less binding. The eyes of guards tracked her every movement, suspicion etched deeply into their faces, but she kept her head bowed and her will steeled. She had survived worse, had lived through the fire of loss and accusation, and refused to burn again. The wolves, hungry, ragged beasts kept apart from the main pack, were her secret solace, weak and starving. They were exiled just as she was, cast out from bonds they once called family. Each night, when the world dwindled to whispers and shadows, she crept to the pens where they lay pressed close together, their ribs sharp beneath patchy fur, eyes glazed with hunger and fear. She brought what scraps she could find, gathered from her scant rations, tiny offerings that barely eased the gnawing emptiness. The wolves watched her with wary hunger, noses twitching as the scent of food met their longing. Serena spoke softly to them, words a quiet balm against the brutal silence. "Hold on," she whispered, voice falling like a gentle wind. "Hold on for me." Her fingers, pale but sure, traced the curve of battered fur, her touch feather-light, yet fierce with empathy. The beasts, her brothers in exile, leaned into her, their wild, broken souls seeking the fragile comfort she offered. It was a silent bond forged in suffering, one no crown or decree could sever. Kaelin noticed. He saw it in the slow, sure way she moved among the wolves, in the softness that filled her eyes when she knelt. It was an unexpected sight in a woman they all marked as a threat. The Alpha King's beast, raw and instinctive, stirred uneasily at the sight of her kindness toward those abandoned, those neglected. The wolf inside Kaelin growled low, not out of anger, but confusion and something dangerously close to fascination. One evening, as a cold wind swept through the corridors, Kaelin stood in the shadow of the vast hall, observing Serena from afar. She was crouched beside the weakest wolf, a gaunt creature, barely more than skin and bone, her hands trembling slightly, but steady as they fed the animal. Her emerald eyes gleamed, fierce and resolute. The tension inside him tightened like a drawn bowstring. Normally, he prided himself on dominion and control, the unshakable distance he maintained between ruler and captive, predator and prey. Yet now, his beast refused to turn away. Curious, protective, entwined with a hunger Kaelin hadn't expected, a dangerous connection. He murmured under his breath, voice almost lost in the crackling hearth, his jaw clenched as the stormy grey of his eyes darkened. He would not let himself be weak, not for a woman accused and broken, not for a wolf-starved exile. But each day that she lingered under his roof, each glance she caught from beneath those intense eyes, chipped away at the fortress he had built around his heart. Her silence was defiance, her subtle compassion, a threat to his cold control. "Why do you stay?" he asked one night, voice low and rough, stepping closer so she could feel the weight of his presence like a physical force. His breath stirred the air between them, sharp and commanding. Serena met his gaze, unflinching, because even the starving wolves deserved to be seen. For a moment, the beast inside Kaelin snarled, not in anger, but in reluctant admiration. And for the first time since her exile, Serena did not feel entirely alone. Their story had only just begun. The chill of dawn crept through the tall windows of Kaelin's fortress, casting long, pale fingers over the niches where Serena's wolves slept. Their breaths came in ragged, uneven streams, the sharpness of their pain scraping against the edges of her mind like shards of ice. It had begun the night before, a sudden, overwhelming flood of sensations that she couldn't explain, instincts she didn't understand. When one of the younger wolves limped near the outer pen, a searing ache blossomed in her chest. The beast's fear and exhaustion pressed into her mind so vividly, she nearly crumpled to her knees, sick with empathy and confusion. She bit the inside of her cheek until the taste of blood grounded her. This was no ordinary connection. She could hear them, the wolves, not just in the soft rustle of fur or the sharp crackling of their growls, but deep, raw screams, their terror during the hunts, the hunger gnawing at their bones, the echo of their loneliness. It clawed through her soul, a tether forged not by choice, but by something ancient, something primal. She was part of their pack in ways she had never known, and with that bond came responsibility, fierce and unrelenting. The paradox twisted inside her. The power frightened her, yet it steadied her trembling spirit. She had been cast out, hunted, broken, yet this bond with the wolves, was a spark she could cling to. A reason not to succumb to the darkness, pressing at the edges of her will. When she closed her eyes, she could feel their heartbeat against her own, their whispers brushing through her mind, a symphony of pain and hope that no exile could ever silence. But the strength came at a price. The secret gnawed at her like a venomous bite, a dangerous revelation that, if exposed, could condemn her. The wolves' fears were her fears, their wounds, her wounds. She was not just a woman caught between kings and courtiers. She was something else entirely, something the world might never understand. And somewhere in the depths of her heart, an ember of defiance sparked. If her survival meant harnessing this mysterious connection, she would. She must. Meanwhile, beyond the stone walls, the cold murmur of doubt had begun to spread like poison among the court. Whispers slithered through corridors and vaulted chambers, tongues loose and venomous. The Alpha King has lost his mind, they said, to harbor a woman accused of treason, a wolf-starved exile whose every breath might bring ruin. Voices questioned his judgment, his strength, his iron will. Some dared to say the inexplicable leniency was a sign of weakness, a crack in Kaelin's otherwise impenetrable armor. In shadowed alcoves, and beneath chandeliers dripping with jeweled light, courtiers leaned into their suspicions. What does Kaelin see in her madness? Pity? Or something more dangerous? They cast sidelong glances at the throne, where the Alpha King sat, a figure carved of ice and fire, and at the woman who, by all reason, should have been chained and silenced. But Kaelin did not waver outwardly. His storm-grey eyes, sharp and unyielding, burned with a fury reserved for those who dared question him. Inside, however, the threads of doubt threatened to unravel the strict control he fought so fiercely to maintain. Zarina was a challenge unlike any before, a wild force that should have been broken, yet refused to yield. Their bond was volatile, unpredictable, and utterly forbidden. He was a king who commanded armies. She was a fugitive whose silence was a blade, and somewhere between the two, a deeper game was unfolding, one that could either consume them or forge unbreakable steel. Her realization of newfound power stoked the fires of that invisible war raging within the fortress. It was late one evening when Serena was alone in the eastern garden, the scent of night-blooming jasmine thick around her. The wolves rested nearby, their shadows long against the cobblestones, but the stirrings within her heart and mind refused to settle. She reached out, distant and trembling, and the connection pulsed sharply. One of the younger wolves was frightened, restless, sensing danger beyond the walls. The fear wrapped around her like a noose, sharp and claustrophobic. Even as she struggled to steady herself, a shadow slipped through the gate, unnoticed by all but the wolves, who bristled and growled low in their throats. The assassin came cloaked in the anonymity of night and silken falsehoods. a blade hidden beneath a commoner's cloak, eyes cold and merciless. His mission was clear: to kill the woman who had stolen the Alpha's attention, to sever whatever fragile thread held his fractured realm together. Serena's breath caught as danger crept closer, but before she could fully grasp the threat, a hand strong, illuminated by moonlight, clamped over her mouth. "Do not scream." Kaelin's voice was a growl of warning, low and harsh, vibing with the power of a storm about to break. He dragged her back into the shadows, unseen by friend or foe. The assassin lunged, blade flashing, but Kaelin was faster. His grip on Serena tightened, protectively, every motion precise, lethal. The strike meant for her was parried silently, but no less deadly, his own blade disappearing beneath the assassin's ribs before the man could draw breath. The body collapsed, silent as night itself, swallowed by the fortress's cold stone. Serena pressed against Kaelin's heart, a wild drum in her chest. Though saved, she felt stripped bare by vulnerability. She was at the mercy of a man whose strength radiated raw and primal power. Power both terrifying and intoxicating. The fragile bond between them deepened in that silent act of salvation, a wordless promise forged in blood and shadows. "Why save me?" her whisper trembled, a mix of fear and hunger threading through the words. Kaelin's storm-grey eyes met hers, fierce and unyielding. "Because I cannot afford to lose what is mine," he said, voice rough with a truth he refused to fully acknowledge. "Not now. Not ever." The words settled between them, heavy with unspoken meaning, with the weight of histories and futures intertwined. Serena's mind spun with the implications. To depend on Kaelin, to allow the walls around her fractured heart to crumble, was to invite a vulnerability she had fought for years to bury. Yet, beneath that fear thrummed a desperate craving, to be claimed, protected, and fiercely defended by a man who could be her ruin or her salvation. In the silent aftermath, as shadows curled over stone and moonlight draped the fortress in silver, Serena clung not just to life, but to the wild, unyielding bond that now tethered her to wolves and king alike. The taste of power was bitter and sweet, a burden and a blessing forged from pain and hope, and through it all, the beast within Kaelin watched and waited, hungry still, but no longer starving. The tempest outside raged with relentless fury, rain lashing against the stone walls of the fortress, as if trying to claw its way in. The cold seeped through the thick wooden door of the wolf enclosure, mingling with the earthy scent of wet fur and musk. Serena's hands moved steadily, though the chill bit into her fingers as she refilled the trough with fresh water. The flickering oil lamps cast long shadows, dancing over the restless forms of the wolves gathered around her. Their eyes, glowing embers of loyalty and wildness, tracked her every motion. Beneath the cadence of the storm, a loneliness settled over Serena like a heavy cloak. The wolves' presence was a balm, their simple acceptance a salve to the fractured pieces of her soul. But even here, within the hollow embrace of the pack, the aching solitude never quite loosened its grip. Her emerald eyes turned downward to the empty space beyond the gate, where Kaelin's shadow often loomed, watchful, distant, and unbearably silent. A fragile impulse stirred in that silent space, a whisper of a memory she had long buried beneath years of grit and survival, a lullaby, soft, tiny, almost lost beneath the howl of the wind. So beneath the hammering rain, Serena's lips parted, and she let it slip out, trembling but sure, the old melody threading through the darkness. "Hush now, my darling, don't you weep. The stars will watch over your dreams so deep." Her voice was uncertain at first, a fragile tremor against the storm, the tendrils of something raw and aching, unspooled in the air. Her faint scar twitched as her throat tightened, the lullaby's sorrowful sweetness weaving into the wolves' restless breath and the beat of their powerful chests. The pack shifted, alerted by the strange softness. One by one the great beasts stirred from their uneasy pacing, their heads turning toward her, nostalgia flickering in their wild eyes, as though the sound breached some ancient memory lodged deep in their primal cores. The alpha wolf, darker than the others, with a silver ragged scar trailing across his snout, stepped forward, one massive paw outstretched, coming to rest near her knee, his lips parted, a low rumble vibrating through his throat. Serena's heart caught. The lupine response was unmistakable: acceptance, a cautious peace. Unseen by her, lurking in the shadows beyond the sheltering wall of stone, Kaelin stood. The storm's fury disguised his rigid figure, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, storm-grey eyes narrowed, focused, yet the usual harbored ferocity softened, rendered almost confessional by what reached him from the enclosure. Serena's voice, fragile and tender, peeled back, layers he had fought to keep sealed. The beast inside him stirred, shifting beneath the hard veneer of the Alpha King's control. His claws itched with a red hunger, not for blood this time, but for something far more elusive, more dangerous. A shared solitude, broken by a whisper of hope. Why does she sing to them? The question barely a breath slipped from him, as if compelled by the hunger gnawing at his gut. It meant weakness. It meant opening the door to feelings he swore he could neither bear nor claim. But the beast was patient. It leaned closer, nudging at the shuttered corners of his heart. Softening the edges, Kaelin had sharpened, glass-like, with cold command. The lullaby was a call, a bridge built from fragile melody, stretched between human and wolf cage, and wild, king, and hunted. He hated the tremor he felt when her voice cracked through the rain, a haunting tether clawing its way through his carefully constructed walls of stoicism. Kaelin pressed his palm against the cool stone, eyes fixed on the dark shape of the alpha wolf that had moved near her. The beast within him twined fingers tighter around that ancient hunger to protect, to claim, to forgive wounds not his own, but now inseparable from his own fate. "I do not lose what is mine," he whispered, the promise shaky yet undeniable. Yet inside, a sliver of doubt pricked him, whispering that perhaps what was his might never be fully won, only shared fragilely, like a song barely sung. The storm intensified, and Serena's voice faltered, fragile and pure beneath the tempest's roar. The wolves nestled closer, as if the lullaby had softened even their savage souls. For a moment, Kaelin's heart wavered between beast and man, between command and surrender, unable to decide which hunger was deeper, which form of starvation, worse hunger for blood or hunger for belonging days later. Under a heavy cloak of twilight, Serena moved silently through the fortress's ancient halls, the scent of aged parchment, thick and intoxicating. Her fingers trailed over the spines of forgotten tomes, dust motes spinning in the silver light filtering through high-mirrored windows. The vast library was a kingdom in itself, a labyrinth of secrets kept from the living by centuries of neglect. Each step took her deeper into shadows, where the weight of countless histories pressed close, whispered half-forgotten truths. It was here, among brittle scrolls and crumbling leather-bound volumes, that Serena sought a fragment of hope or understanding, something beyond the raw survival that had filled her days since being cast out. She surprised herself by lingering over a worn manuscript, the leather cover cracked and mottled with age. Carefully, reverently, she opened it and found words penned in a script both elegant and eerie. Her breath caught as she read lines that sang a prophecy as old as the kingdom itself, a bloodline bound to shadow and flame, whose union shall make or break the crown's name. When wolf and woman's destinies entwine, the fate of kings shall in her veins shine. Serena's fingers trembled as she traced the faded ink. The words were impossible, their truth so dangerous that speaking them aloud might ignite the fragile balance of power resting on Kaelin's narrow shoulders. Her mind reeled. The blood, she thought, was diluted by bitter exile pulsed with the same fierce flame that lit the Alpha King's court. Her lineage, once a secret lost in the ruins of betrayal, might be the cure, the curse that bound their futures. Fear tightened her chest. If Kaelin knew, would he see her as the mate claimed by his beast, or the threat that could unravel his reign? Could she risk revealing the truth and shattering the fragile bond forged in blood and shadow? Her heart ached with the weight of the secret, the legacy she wore, like a scar beneath her skin. Yet the temptation to share the burden with Kaelin, to shed the loneliness that had never quite left her since her fall, pulled at her. But she kept silent, closing the tome with a soft sigh and slipping it back into the shadows where lost truths belonged. For now, meanwhile, Kaelin prowled the outer edges of his pack's territory, the air heavy with an unease he could neither place nor shake. His storm-grey eyes scanned the horizon, as restless as the heart beating beneath his battered armor. The wolves, the sons and daughters of his blood and feral command, moved with a growing tension. Skirmishes flared between younger males, and the pack's harmony rippled like disturbed water. Seldom before had he felt so torn, so acutely aware of the fragility of the world he ruled. His gaze drifted inward, to the silent chamber of his own heart, where a strange unrest churned. It was not the beast's hunger for dominance, or the unyielding drive of survival. It was something less defined, quieter, yet more insistent. A yearning that twisted like smoke in his veins, refusing to be named. He thought of Serena, her emerald eyes, fierce and fragile, the lullaby that had tamed the wildness in his wolf's eyes, the shadow of her bloodline whispering through the fortress walls. His jaw tightened, the crescent tattoo along his jawline seeming to sting with revelation and regret. She carries more than the hunger of the hunted. She carries my fate. Asterisk. But Kaelin would not surrender to the fear that tightened his gut. Instead, he embraced the storm inside, the wild and the whispered promise of something fierce and extraordinary lurking just beyond reach. The pack's unrest would not be quelled by growls and commands alone. No. It would be tamed by the acknowledging of their shared hunger, and by the fragile, fierce bond mustered in moments, like the one beneath the thunderous night, when Serena's voice dared to sing to the wolves, starved, not just for food, but for connection. Kaelin turned from the wild horizon, steeling himself against the fragile distance that still separated them, both mate and king. He would find the words. She would find the courage. And together, perhaps, they might finally begin to forgive the beasts within. The great hall was thick with tension when the council gathered, the heavy oak doors sealed like the tomb that Serena found herself trapped within. Flickering torchlight danced across the stone walls, casting long shadows that swayed with the murmurs of the assembly. Kaelin sat unmoving at the head of the dais, his posture an unyielding pillar of authority, but beneath the surface, his beast twisted with a growing unrest. Every